If I'm completely honest, my history with developing is complicated. Like most people, I learnt to develop film back at school and really enjoyed it. And then I stopped developing for many, many years. Then, when the spicy cough season started, I got back into developing because my local lab basically shut down during that period. And I was enjoying it. I was actually really liked getting back into developing and doing both colour and black and white. But I had varied results. Sometimes I'd have a roll and it'll come out perfect. Then using the exact same chemicals a couple of days later, using the exact same process, I'd get weird wavy lines and splotches on my film. And I could never really dial it in so that I knew that every single roll would always come out perfect. And so after a while I just gave up, and when my film lab opened up again, I started sending my rolls off to them. However, with the development of the EB617 and the 4x5 back after that, I've been doing a lot of testing. And it's not really very realistic to shoot a test roll with a camera, send it off to the lab, wait for it to come back and so on. So I've started doing a lot more developing at home. Primarily black and white with a CineStill kit. It's a single black and white kit. It's a single process. It's room temperature. It's as simple as you could possibly get. And so I've been able to shoot test shots, adjust where I need to my design, and then shoot another test roll time and time again. And so with all of that developing, I thought, it's probably time I actually spend some money and actually get some real hardware. Now, the high watermark, as it were, for home developing is obviously the Jobo CPE automated developer. The only problem there is twofold. One, very expensive. Even second-hand, they can reach upwards of close to $1,000 here in Australia. The other issue for me, personally, is they're quite large. They take up a lot of space. And I live in a fairly small 2-bedroom apartment. I don't have the room to store a CPE2 when I'm not using it. But I really want all of the features. So I want the water bath, I want it to be automated and so on. Now, there are a couple of options that have sort of come off the market really recently. AGO have a automated film developer. However, I'm wary of that one for a couple of reasons. One, it's once again quite expensive. I think it's somewhere around of 500 euros, which roughly works out to be $800 or $900 Australian. It doesn't use a water bath to keep your chems at a constant temperature. The way they do it is they will adjust the development time interactively as it detects that your chems are slowly decreasing in temperature. I'm not a big fan of that. I think that realistically the best way to get a guaranteed constant quality is if you have your chemicals running in a water bath or running at a constant temperature throughout the entire process. So where did that leave me? Well, as you've probably seen from all my previous videos, I had to build mine myself. To control everything, I'm going to need an Arduino. Then I'm going to need a stepper motor. This will run the tank back and forth. To control that, I've got a belt with some gears. Now, to control this stepper motor, I have a motor driver which goes in between. It's basically a shield that sits on top of the Arduino. For temperature, I have this temperature sensor which plugs in like so. Then for display, I have two options. I have one with buttons and one without buttons. Now, the one with buttons, the buttons are quite small, and my concern is also that when you're developing, you tend to get liquids where you don't want them. So I've also purchased, to go with the non-button display, this stick-on set of buttons, which I think might be the better option. They're waterproof. Alright, so I've got my Arduino and I've connected the motor driver hat on top of the Arduino. Then I've got my NEMA 17 stepper motor plugged in there. And then just after a quick upload of some sample code, let's see what happens if we power this on. Something's happening, but not what I expected. So, not really knowing a lot about stepper motors, I got onto the forums to ask some questions. Now, if anybody has ever gone onto a forum where they don't really know anything about the particular topic and they ask for help, you will know what will happen. inevitably you will get 3 or 4 weird beards who will basically eviscerate you, saying you haven't asked this question the correct way, you're an idiot, why are you asking this wrong, why you haven't done this. So the end result was, it took a while before I got even the slightest hint of an answer that was even moderately helpful. Okay, so with the correct stepper driver, I can now move this. That seems a lot. That really kind of seems like a lot just to wind a motor forward and backwards somewhat regularly. So I realised that I don't really need everything that a stepper motor is actually going to give me. I don't need that precision and accuracy when realistically I just need to run a motor forward and backward at a specific interval. So I figured that probably a DC motor is going to be my better option, an easier option. So to test the theory, I went and bought out literally the cheapest DC motor I could find at my local electronics store. And with some very simple code, I was able to get an engine to go forward, and then the opposite direction. Okay, it's been a week and my delivery from AliExpress has arrived, and I've managed to get 2 different motors. I pretty much just picked them based on the shaft diameter primarily, but then of course when I got it I realised that the shaft diameter of this one is off by 1mm for what I was planning to use as my gearing. However, we'll get to that in a minute because that has changed. So anyway, if we look at this motor first, if I plug this one in, using the same code as I had on that other DC motor that I had before, if I go to this one, you'll see something interesting. This one is geared to run a fair bit slower. So I went to the hardware store and I got just some of these casters. Not entirely sure if that's what I'm going to go with because they are a little bit close together. So when the tank sits on it, it's a little unstable. So we've got our little motor. And if I put this against the Jobo, and once it, as I said, it's a little bit, but you can sort of see it is rotating the Jobo. Not incredibly well. Now, the original plan for running this was I had a belt, but it occurred to me that this belt is really going to be a water transfer system, because as it goes up, water is going to follow this belt up and over here. So then I was thinking, how about I do it like a focus ring for a lens, for a follow focus. So if I put a gear around, 3D printed a gear here, I would be able to have an engine at the top, or a motor at the top, sorry, that would interface with that. And then if I put this sitting up vertically, the motor's sort of, a decent amount away from where the gear would be. So any water around here, if it got anywhere, it'd just get inside here, which is not as big an issue as it getting near the electrics. And as an added bonus, this one, I plug this in to the Arduino using the exact same code as before. So it spins just as before, but this one, I can't cause it to slow down in any way, shape or form. So I think the torque on this motor is more than adequate for what I need. Okay, so I've printed off a little test plate to mount the rollers. I've cut them out of the little metal cages that they currently had because I wanted to make them wider just to make the base more stable. I've got some rod to pass through, and let's see if I've got my measurements right. Alright, so theoretically, it's actually not too bad, even without the rollers running, just the slipperiness of the rollers. The next step was to design the gear that would actually drive the film developer. Now, I've never done anything with gears before or designed my own gears before. turns out it's incredibly simple. There are websites where you can literally just punch in diameters and sizes that you think you need, and it'll actually generate the gears and the different size gears that you'll need in the DXF, which you can take into something like Fusion and create a 3D model of incredibly easy. I think it took me maybe 3 goes before I had dialed in the gear exactly how large I wanted it to fit on Jobo, as well as to the gear reduction, or the gear between the smaller gear and the larger gear that would run the Jobo at the exact speed I wanted it to. So I was actually quite surprised, and this was probably one of the easiest part of the entire project. Okay, so I've got the gear on, and if I hold it in place, and with a few clamps, I finally had a working mock-up. Okay, I've made a bunch of little changes. I've got this slot here that this connects into, that will allow this to slot back and forth to engage the gear. I've modelled a little socket here for the temperature probe, which will go down in there, like so. Alright, so I've got the part printed out of PETG. I'll go ahead and put in all the heat sets into all of the parts. So let's try a dry, or at least a dry fit. So first things first. So I've got it in place, however, the spring is not strong enough to actually return it. So let's go for a slightly stronger spring. Alright, so I went from this spring to a slightly stronger spring, and you can see there it's retained here and it's retained there, and that's exactly what I was looking for. Alright, so that's in place. So the theory would be, that goes in there. Really gronk down on these screws too hard because it's not like the Arduino is going anywhere. Alright, so that in there, that engages like so. Theoretically, if I plug this in, what have I done? The cable can't be unplugged. Alright, minor crisis averted. Alright, so I place that in there, and then I've got my power connector, plug that in, and then came the part that I've been dreading, the coding. This is not something I have really that much experience with. I've made one project with an Arduino before, which was a shutter speed tester. That project took me the better part of probably 6 months to get working, and that was following instructions on a YouTube channel. It took me a while, and because I wanted to tweak it and make it the way I wanted it. And after that, I have not touched Arduino or programming for quite some time. Alright, so after a little bit of messing around, I've got the temperature sensor wired in to this breadboard here, this is my testing Arduino. And you can see over here, it's reading, and if I put my fingers and hold the temperature sensor, it should go up in temperature. And in what took way longer than I was expecting, I was able to get the OLED display working. It doesn't flicker in real life, it's just the camera is seeing it. Alright, so this mess of wires is where we're at. So I've got everything plugged in, I've got the code running, and you can see there the little temperature sensor that's here. So if I put my hand on that one, it should start to increase. 22, 23, okay, that's working well. We've got our buttons down here, which will eventually be here. So if I press some of these buttons, so I've currently got C41BW and E6. I think I'm going to remove E6 though, because I never do E6 and it requires a lot more setup. But anyway, so if I choose C41, you'll see it goes blank, but with the start button, and that's actually supposed to show a clock. Now, if I was smart, I probably would have done the Arduino coding part first and then started working on the 3D design. But the building is the part that I enjoyed, so I did that first. However, when it came time to actually running and writing the code on the Arduino, it didn't take long before I discovered that a standard Arduino is a very limited platform, way more than I thought it would be. And it really just didn't have enough memory to run the amount of code I needed, running multiple clocks and so on, which presented a problem. And so the solution, which I very quickly found, was to scale up from a standard Arduino to an Arduino Mega. Arduino Megas are bigger, but they also have a lot more inputs and outputs, which I didn't really need, but it also has a lot more storage, which meant my code would actually execute correctly. If I start the program, motor starts just fine. For some reason it doesn't do its reverse though. It just does its forward, and then when it finishes its program we should get a nice joyous beep. This gives you a little idea of how many versions of this case part I had to print to get it right, which resulted in this, the finished piece. And I say finished in that it's finished right now, but I really don't like it. It's a lot bigger than my original plan. Originally it was supposed to be that big. So because of the Mega, it's significantly bigger. Alright, so here's the finished product. Plugs in by just regular AC power. And you'll see I've got a little plastic tub. Created a little holder for my dev and chemicals and so on. And it's got a little screw boss there, so I can lock it in place. Like so. And then it's just a simple fact of you've got gear along here. Goes in like so. So we've got our chems in a water bath. Water bath is reading it currently at 27 degrees. I've got a thermometer here. It's reading at 26.5, so within half a degree. And I'm going to be running at 27 degrees, which means, according to Sydney Still, for constant agitation, it is 3 minutes at 27 degrees. But I'm going to also do a 5-minute pre-soak, which according to Jobo seems to be a good idea. So I've got my pre-soak, which is just water, or distilled water, and the devs, there's no clicks obviously for black and white. So let's give this a go and see what happens. All right, so I've got my water in. Let's do that. I want to choose user, select, pre-wash, start. So I haven't shown it in the video, but there was a little bit of back and forth in figuring out the water level I needed in the tank. It appears that I missed the day at school where they teach you that air is actually lighter than water, and so I had situations where the tank was actually floating away because I had too much water in the water bath. But after I dialed in the amount of water and got that perfectly level, I had no more problems. Alright, so we've got our warning tone telling us that we've gone past our time, so I can press stop, which will cancel that warning tone. I can now empty out my pre-wash and then pour in my developer. Make sure the caps are nice and tight. And start. Okay. And alright, so stop dev. I did 4 minutes. Because I'm an idiot. I need to pour my canvas back in. Alright, so that's been 5 minutes wash. And we have an image. Well, that's, to be honest, I'm quite surprised. Alright, so I put that in there. And let it dry. In what was a massive surprise to me, I actually got a usable, well-developed image from the very first use of the developer. Realistically, the only problem I had was knowing the amount of level of water I needed so that the tank would sit perfectly with the amount of developer in the tank, and then also therefore the amount of air that was still in the tank. Once I got that level dialed in, it sat in perfectly and the developer ran really well. I was truly expecting to have to go back and maybe even slightly adjust the design a few times before I got a working unit. Now, I do want to do some further tests. From my research on the internet, the consensus around development times when using an automatic film developer where you've got constant agitation is varied and wide. There are some people who say you must always use a pre-wash. There are other people who say never use a pre-wash. There are some people that say you should temper the film unit, which is bring it up to temperature but not with water inside it. Then there are some people who are saying that you should run your developer with a pre-wash but actually run it at durations for intermittent agitation. So there is a lot of variation there, and I'm going to do some tests. As well as that, I also have just got some more C41 chems in, so I'm going to do some more tests with colour as well and see how it goes with the higher temperature of the colour developing, and see if I get some nice consistent results there. Now, the big question is, where do we go from here? After finishing the unit and having it working, the very first thing my brain did was start to look at, oh, I could do this and I could do that, I could make it better here, I could make it better there. I think that there is going to be a version 2 of it. I've pretty much already decided that I'm going to convert it to an ESP32 controller or unit that will run the developer. That will allow me to do a lot more on the unit with a much smaller chip. The ESP32s are quite small, so I can go back to a smaller housing. I don't have to go with the Arduino Mega. That will also allow me to do something which I realized after I developed the system would be really useful, would be the ability to alter the development times and the stages for each of the developments interactively. So either via on the screen, maybe a little touch screen, or perhaps via a web app. So I could actually control it with my phone. So I think I'm definitely going to do that. Now, I released a little preview teaser of this a little while back on YouTube Shorts, and immediately got a whole bunch of people asking me, am I going to be selling this? You know, is it available for purchase? In its current form, no. I don't think it's something at this stage that I'd be happy to sell. I mean, it's still a work in progress. But what I've decided to do is I'm going to pop a beta version of it, as you were, on my website, freely for download, and with instructions, very limited instructions of what hardware you'll need to go along with the 3D files. I would highly recommend you only even look at this if you are even moderately familiar with Arduino and you're into tinkering. I will not be providing detailed instructions, and I will not be helping people because I don't really know what I'm doing, so I don't really feel comfortable helping other people because my knowledge is limited at best. That being said, I will be putting it up on the website, and I would highly recommend, if anybody wants to give it a go and you've got a tinkerer spirit, by all means download it, and any feedback you can give me would be spectacular, because then I can roll it into a version 2 with an ESP32, and then perhaps sometime down in the future, once I have a fully working unit that has a touch screen, has the ability to do things like, for instance, alter the calibration of the temperature sensor, for instance, if you have your temperature sensor is not giving you proper results. Being able to put in different recipes for different chems, whether you're using Cinestil or Tetanol or whatever. Having all of that in, say, perhaps either a touch screen or on a phone would be spectacular. If I get to that stage and I'm comfortable with it, then I will possibly look at selling it. But in the meantime, I haven't got the files completely finished yet, but keep an eye on the website. I will put them up there, and hopefully some people might find it moderately useful. So other than that, I'm going to go and develop some more film, and in the meantime, say hi to your dog for me.